Greetings, back again. I did ask on that last video to let me know if you actually liked me, sharing some words of insight or inspiration instead of just the replay from Sunday's meditation, or Sunday's message and meditation. And there were a few of you who was like, yes, we welcome more. So, hey, I enjoy it. So here I am. So today, I wanted to share one of my favorite books on my journey. This book is entitled Prosperity's 10 Commandment. Sharing a little bit of my journey. You know, I used to work for the university system. Prior to that, I was a teacher, so there was a time where I was not fully an entrepreneur. But as I began to grow in God and grow into my spiritual walk and practices, and that began to merge with my passion to teach and serve. That became me doing a lot of side work of teaching and doing meditations and different things like services, coaching, counseling, all the things that I'm doing now, but at a smaller scale, on a part-time scale. But after a while, it was like, I want to do that full time, when you're doing what God has called you to do and what you're passionate about, what you love to do and you're also working, it's like that full-time job becomes like a nuisance after a while. I don't know who has that same testimony, but that's part of my testimony. So I was led to, transition out of full-time working and I went into entrepreneurship. And when I first went into entrepreneurship, it was very hard for me to reconcile with not having a consistent check coming in. And so, it was like stress and anxious because I'm very used to having this consistent money flow. And for those of you all who know with entrepreneurship, it sometimes it's not it doesn't come in these finite, consistent ways. It comes in ebbs and flows, surpluses, and sometimes there's not a surplus, and you just gotta just stay at it and trust. So this was one of the books that I actually came across because one of the things that happened is as I started to face challenges, I faced them with the mind of, well, what's the context in spirit about this? Like, what is the guidance in spirit? Not in this world, because that would be go get a job or try to find, a contract or try to find a job, essentially. That's usually like, okay, if you're an entrepreneur and you're needing consistent income, don't be afraid to get a small job. And then at that time, working from home wasn't that popular, but there were some jobs like, oh, you can work from home. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can get a job. No, but after a while, that was out of the question. And so I had to establish a level of faith. First of all, a level of understanding about prosperity from a spiritual standpoint, a level of understanding about currency from a true essential standpoint, and then be able to align with that truth. And that was totally contradictory to the truth I knew intellectually and the truth of this world when it comes to money and prosperity. So it was a whole like mindset shift I had to go through. And this was just one of the books. It was a few that I read, and not all of them were like prosperity books. It was mindset books, books about mindset, how to shift your mindset, because there has to be a renewal of the mind for you to truly surrender in faith. For you to truly trust that all is God and God is good. So all is good. Everything is always working out for me. This purpose is not my purpose, it's God's purpose. So everything that's needed for it to unfold is, included in the package. It takes work, it takes a mindset shift, it takes practice, it takes exercising that faith muscle. And so this book was very helpful. This book has so it's a Prosperity's 10 Commandments, which I think is amazing. And so it goes from first commandment to the 10 commandments. And I just wanted to read the first commandment. And I have the notion to like do an audio book and like read the whole thing and provide it on my YouTube channel. That idea did come across my mind and I wrote it down, but I'm not gonna promise it, but it might be coming. But I'll say now, if you want to hear more from this book in the next coming weeks, maybe I'll just do one commandment each week and add it to the newsletter for the next 10 weeks. Who knows? I don't know. We'll see. But the first one, just to give you a sense of how the book reads, is the first commandment. You shall look to no other source but God for your supply. Which the first commandment, as we know it, is, you shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 20, verse 3. You shall look to no other source but the Almighty for your supply. That's commandment number 1 in prosperity. It says, Pilates' question, what is truth, is the cry of every person's soul at some point in his or her existence. Even as Jesus stood silently before Pilate at the revealed answer, so the Christ in everyone silently awaits recognition as the truth of his or her being. Truth is the state in which spirit dwells, a state of perfection that is eternal, that is eternally, creatively active. Truth may be briefly defined as the action of spirit. As such, it is unlimited in nature and cannot be confined within the restrictions of time or space. In other words, truth, once voiced, is true under any circumstances for all eternity. When Moses delivered the 10 Commandments to the children of Israel, he voiced the truth God had revealed to him concerning the relationship of people to their Creator and to their fellows. The 10 Commandments, in the form in which Moses gave them, served as a basis of right action toward God and humanity for the unruly primitive people that Moses led out of Egyptian bondage. Each commandment is an embodiment of truth. Therefore, the form can be changed to meet the needs of people at all times, under all conditions. Truth is capable of limitless expansion. For this reason, we find the essential truth embodied in the 10 Commandments to be not only the basis of right spiritual and moral conduct, but also the basis for establishing permanent prosperity. The first commandment is the very foundation of Christianity. You shall have no other gods before me. We are to acknowledge no other source of life, love, wisdom, and power than our Creator. Only with this secure foundation can we bring into manifestation our spiritual perfection. In this same commandment, we find the only sound basis for the manifesting of permanent prosperity. It is prosperity's first commandment. You shall look to no other source but God for your supply. Our scriptures fairly teem with exhortation to look to God as the one source of supply. The Old and New Testament are filled with promises of rich fulfillment of every need for those who acknowledge God's presence and power. David, the shepherd king, voiced the confidence of humanity in a creator who is able and willing to provide for his creation when he said, "For God alone my soul waits in silence, for my hope is from him." Humans have always looked to deity for their heart's desire. One primitive belief was that of buying the favor of deity through making gifts and sacrifices. Sacrifice played an important part in the many of the early forms of religious worship. Since human life was held to be the most precious of all gifts, it too was offered to deity in propati- propati- in sacrifice. I'm sure that word means in sacrifice, to ensure good crops, good hunting, and victory over enemies. Hey, it's all real over here. And real time. The Hebrews were among the first to introduce the idea that human conduct has something to do with gaining the favor of deity. They saw deity as a mighty king a stern but righteous judge. They conceived the idea that prosperity, health, happiness, and protection were rewards for good conduct. The ruler, good conduct meted out by their God, the ruler of heaven and earth. They still saw deity as a power outside his universe, demanding obedience and worship. But all through the Old Testament, there are evidences of growing understanding of the relationship between God and humanity. This understanding was a necessary preparation for the revelation of Jesus, that God dwells in us, has already provided for our every need, and awaits only our expression of trust in God and our acceptance of God's bountiful blessings to deliver them into our lives. So I didn't realize this chapter was so long, but it continues. Good stuff already, though, right? But I have a few notes highlighted here that I wanted to share from this. Tips. When we think confidently about what we have asked in prayer, nothing can keep it from us. We can say of ourselves, I too am a living intelligence, just like God is divine mind. I am mind and therefore creative of nature. I have a body that is the product of my mind, and I live in circumstances that are also the product of my mind. So think confidently about what we have asked in prayer. If we do this, nothing can keep it from us. Another note I highlighted here: accept our daily bread from our Father with the unquestioning faith of a little child, and then discipline our minds to think joyfully of God's bounty instead of our fears and worries. We are bound to prosper. When we accept our daily bread from our Father with the unquestioning faith of a little child, and then discipline our minds to think joyfully of God's bounty instead of fears and worries, we are bound to prosper. What is our daily bread? It is the guidance and the instructions and the hints and the hunches from God. It's the encouragement that we get from our higher inner being throughout the day. And it said, if we accept that daily bread, that which Spirit feeds us, with unquestioning faith and be obedient and discipline our minds while we're doing it, we are bound to prosper. All right. It says, what we need to realize, this is another note I highlighted. What we need to realize is that all material avenues of supply are merely the pay clerks of God. I love that. What we need to realize is that all material avenues of supply are merely pay clerks of God. Make sure you say that. This is how my prosperity is expressing itself through the prosperity of my God, my Almighty, the Almighty. This is how it's choosing to express itself to me. Through this job, through this contract, through this grant, through this what? It is not this job that I depend on. It is not this grant that I depend on. It is not this person I depend on. I know that this person is merely the current pay clerk of God. And if this pay clerk runs out, surely there's another pay clerk around the corner. Hello. and at times, all the pay clerks are flowing in abundance at the same time. Hallelujah. All right, another note. The firm of God and us Inc. never fails. It says the firm of God and us Inc. never fails. Let me give some context to that. It says if an individual is working for a reliable firm and the pay clerk who gives the individual his or her envelope each week makes a mistake or absconds, the individual is not disturbed because he or she knows that the firm will make good. Well, the firm of God and us Inc. never fails. You working for the firm entitled God and Us Inc. God and all of us Inc. And that firm never fails. I also highlighted God always pays on demand, the demand of faith. We need to learn that God always pays on demand, the demand of faith. When any human channel of supply fails, we have only to remember that the source of supply will continue to fill our needs through some other channel when we send out our call of faith. Another one that I highlighted, God has innumerable channels through which supply can come into my life. It says, proclaim this. You are not the source of my supply. It's context. When they can enlarge their vision and see that prosperity comes from God only, they will have a different attitude towards debtors. So this part was talking about debt, which, a lot of people have to kind of get some understanding. Like, how do I deal with debt in God? How do I deal with debt in God? Meaning in my God mind, and this is saying they will be able to say this with conviction. You should be able to say this with conviction. I am not the source. You are not, sorry, debtors. You are not my source. You are not the source of my supply. I look only to God for my prosperity. God has innumerable channels through which supply comes into my life. You are one of those channels of abundance for me. Ashe. I highlighted God never limits us. We limit ourselves by filling our minds with fears, doubts, worries, and false beliefs that prevent us from accepting our divine heritage of abundant good. God never limits us. We limit ourselves by filling our minds with fear, doubt, worries, and false beliefs that prevent us from accepting our divine heritage of abundant good. All right. Those are all the things that I highlighted in there, but this whole chapter is nice, nice, nice. And then I love it because it has some reflection questions at the end too. So listen, I hope this, rewind this back if you need to hear it again. It's on my YouTube channel. It's going to be on my YouTube channel under Insights with Queen Yen or Queen Chats with Queen Yen. So you can rewind this back to hear those insights, so that we can have insight to who we really are and what is truly prosperity for us, how we are one with it. But we got to understand the laws, got to live by the laws. Whatever laws you live by becomes, whether you are successful or not. If you live by the laws of this land, you're going to fall victim to what this land results in, which earth, it's not eternal like that. But if you want to experience bliss, you want to experience no limitations, eternity, you want to experience that, then live by the laws of God. And one of those commandments is to remember. What is that commandment? The way we know it, that we've been taught, the commandment is, and they say, use these commandments in all contexts. Now, in the context of prosperity, you shall have no other gods before me. That first commandment, it becomes, you shall look to no other source but God for your supply. Amen. I hope this was inspiring. You can find this book. I'll put the link in the caption. I found this book. I won't say you can find it because sometimes, I go to Unity Books and I don't see some of them. But the website on the back is unitybooks.org, unitybooks.org. But I went on Amazon and typed in the title and it popped up. So yeah, you can find it there. All right. I hope this was helpful. Listen, pay attention to everything down here in the newsletter. There are services of the month. You have a service special. There's a sound bath happening this Saturday because it is full moon. So I have the sound bath this Saturday. Of course, I have a full moon meditation this week as well. We have a cooking class coming up this month. We have a tea time session coming up this month. Of course, there's Wednesday yoga, Sunday Pilates. So stay in tune with everything that's going on And stay. I also want to say, stay tuned to both websites. If you're not on both newsletters, this is a separate newsletter. This is OU Ministries newsletter. But I encourage you to become a member to the newsletter of the Garden, because there's so many other things that's associated with the Garden that I don't often put on the ministries page or calendar or newsletter. And so become a member. Become a newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter. Make sure you sign up for the newsletter for both of them so you can stay in tune with everything that OU has to offer. We give thanks for this word today. May it be fruitful for you. May you be able to receive the word that you are an abundant being. Just follow the guidance, the laws of the Creator, and one of them is to understand that God is your source of supply. God is your source of supply. Everything that actually, where you manifest money, resources, and all that through, they're just God's pay clerks. These are just things that the Almighty planned to use to bless you. But don't put your faith in those things. Put your faith in the source. All right? Peace and love, y'all.